There's plenty of sex and violence to be found in the Bible, but when I think of a setting to build an action game around, Christianity just doesn't inspire the same creative streak as Greek or Norse mythology. That, and people still believe in the events depicted and it actually happened, and tend to get a bit upset if you depict the more absurd parts of it as anything but a parable on love and forgiveness. So instead of adapting anything from the Old Testament, EA chose the world's first self-insert biblical fanfiction, The Divine Comedy, written by Dante Alighieri, played here by the world's most angry Englishman, which is a far cry from history's pettiest Florentian. I guess titling this The Divine Comedy to accurately represent the public domain source material was a no-go for a game full of unintentional comedy, as it attempted to adapt the first act of a Middle Ages Italian poem into a dark, near-pornographic clone of God of War. The difference between being inspired by something and straight up copying it is that the copy won't stand out unless it turns everything up to 11, so the ick and nudity levels in Dante's Inferno outclass anything you'll find in God of War. I can't believe I find myself saying this, but the old God of War games are a bit more tasteful than Dante's Inferno, and that's saying a lot for a series with a tradition of including a sex minigame where Kratos grunts off screen to button prompts. Dante's Inferno is not a bad game. It would rest comfortably near the top of my top 10 list of 7 out of 10 rated games. Before they were liquidated, Visceral Games were in charge of EA's make something like this other trending game and earn us more money department, developing Dante's Inferno back when God of War style action games were hot. At the same time they were making Resident Evil 4 inspired third-person shooter Dead Space. So they know how to make an okay game, but only after someone else does all the hard work of figuring out the formula. They weren't the only ones for sure. Darksiders comes to mind, and they even chose the same Christianity angle. But you can hold God of War and Dante's Inferno up to the light and see the lines they traced. There isn't a single element that I can't pinpoint the origin of in God of War. This game illustrates very well the idea of just surfing on an aesthetic wave. But if you dig, no, not dig, even just blow on it, you'll see it's shallow and absolutely dumb. What would a God of War clone be without an antihero who committed atrocities in the name of God, and then ended up wearing a reminder of his sins on his own skin? At least with Kratos, it was a curse laid on him. Dante does this of his own accord. I never figured out why he does it, but the guy friggin' commits to it, redoing his entire outfit around it by removing his breastplate and chainmail to show it off. And to make it all the stranger, Dante is on his way home to his wife after fighting in the Crusades, so he must have been planning on surprising her with his new body art. But the cross tapestry also serves as a visual for his backstory, a backstory that Dante is somehow forgetful of despite having sewn an elaborate tapestry depicting every important person of his life and every sin he committed while fighting in the Crusades. As a crusader, Dante was assaulting a city in the Holy Land. The religiously sanctuated slaughter was going well, at least until the moment when a man casually walks up to Dante and stabs him in the back. It's also another tick on the Kratos did it box, since God of War games have more than once started with Kratos dying and fighting his way out of the afterlife. But there was effort put into making a spectacle out of it each time. This is the same fate NPC soldiers in an Assassin's Creed game meet, used and forced to accept an anticlimax to their life.
Fate is decided. Everlasting damnation for your sins.
But that's not possible. The bishop assured us.
Come, face eternity. Soon you'll be joined by those whose lives you have ruined, whose souls you have damned.
I will not let my sins damn those dear to me.
Turns out that death just makes Dante angrier, and being the pious man of God that he is, declines to accept his own cut string of mortality and battles death, because you can apparently just do that, and wins, killing death, which in a smarter game would have some earth-shaking ramifications. Arriving home, Dante discovers that his wife has cut a bit of the "I died so you can develop as a character" syndrome. But when you consider that Dante just killed death, I don't even know how dying works anymore. In case you're wondering, CG boobs don't count on the Metro Last Light Index since they're pre-rendered. The in-game boobs, however, are on the standard 5 years behind Metro Last Light curve. They should have stuck a Maytag logo on Beatrice, because she has to be gaming's best example of being fridged, defined as the act of introducing a female character just to do something horrible to her, so the male in her life can have a reason to do something worth writing a story about. She's dead by the time Dante returns home, and she spends the rest of the game leading him down a path of redemption with her tits out, and the subtle promise that if he doesn't, she'll spend the rest of eternity getting digged down better than Dante ever gave her by Lucifer in the lowest circle of hell. Dante's lucky he's from the Middle Ages, or she would be texting him illicit images of herself with her new boyfriend to make him feel even worse.
I have to go with him, my love. I gave my word.
Dante is a little more than pissed off at the idea of being cucked by Lucifer, so he runs toward the ruins of a church in the distance, where a wall collapses and he discovers a hole in the ground which leads down into hell. As one would expect, religion is often full of convenient storytelling, but I've never encountered a verse where someone had a portal to hell in their backyard.
Why, Dante? Why did you break your promise?
I don't understand.
I don't either, but for whatever reason, Dante remembers none of his infidelity despite stitching a tapestry that documents his affair onto his chest. Gameplay in Dante's Inferno is what you've come to expect from any God of War clone. Combat focused on mixing ground and air combos with a stretchy whip-like weapon that ensures you never actually miss an enemy even if you play with your monitor off. But Dante only receives 2 weapons in the game: Death's Scythe for melee attacks, and Beatrice's Cross for spamming projectile attacks like the most annoying and broken fighting game characters. And since you receive both at the start of the game, you better enjoy the combat because it isn't going to change much. You're stuck upgrading them. There's also platforming and puzzles to solve, but there's nothing really worth mentioning about them. I don't want to spend a lot of words okaying something, so I'll use only 2. It do.
A lady called. I prayed for her to command me.
Beatrice.
I fear my friend has gone astray, she said.
Virgil acts as Dante's guide through the circles of hell. He's also apparently doing this because Beatrice asked him to guide Dante to her. But whenever Dante catches up with her, she doesn't seem to be in the pleading video game princess mood, condemning Dante for betraying her before making out with Lucifer. So maybe that's why she referred to Dante as her friend when asking Virgil to guide him. Considering how many Wilhelms have died in cinema, there must be a lot of them down here. During his descent into hell, Dante comes across famous sinners throughout the ages, and can either condemn or absolve them. But you're expected to perform a rhythm music game to act as a point multiplier if you want to absolve them, so I'm mainly stuck to ramming my scythe through their head. It feels like a poorly implemented moral choice system, except that this takes place in hell, meaning everyone down here has made some pretty bad moral choices, and a hypocrite like Dante has no place condemning anyone, and I'm not even sure what that would accomplish. They're already in hell. You don't get any more condemned than that. I could get behind Dante's story a bit more if I knew what his goal was. So far, he's just chased after Beatrice to catch up with her and ask why she's doing this, to which she responds by making out with Lucifer. And then it's off to the next circle to do it all over again. It reminds me of Mario and Princess Peach, except if Peach was a whore canonically instead of only in fan fiction. I guess this is another case of a story where the main character must chase after someone until they luck into a solution.
I belong to him now.
You've only yourself to blame.
The game never explained it, so I had to go searching the fan wiki. An act that for now on automatically means I sinned the point twice. Apparently Beatrice's bargain was that if Dante didn't cheat on her while at war, Lucifer would ensure he returned home safely, and if he did sleep with another woman, Beatrice's soul would be his. I guess God wasn't listening to prayers at the time if she instead relied on Satan. I'm somewhat impressed when someone can use racism subtly. That's normally a very obvious and in-your-face sort of thing in entertainment, but when Dante's Inferno betrays Lucifer and Beatrice in the same visual language as Piper Perry surrounded on a couch, I have to admit it took a few passes before my brain finally noticed it and hit the raise eyebrow switch. Lucifer is depicted in black smoke with a mutantly large cock, while Beatrice is a pale and unsullied white girl until she gets hoed up later. I found Orpheus on Charon's boat. The other poem Dante's Inferno casually rips off for the whole grieving man journeying into hell to save his lover bit. Since Orpheus was condemned to hell for attempting to impede God's will, doesn't that mean Dante is doing the exact same thing? Did they establish the same parallel with Orpheus and then completely miss that bit?
You there, stand aside from those that are dead.
During the climax of the game, Lucifer reveals that Dante is dead, but Charon, the boatman of the dead, doesn't seem to agree. There was really no point in ripping Charon's head off. He was ferrying you across the river, which is the way you needed to go.
And who remains in limbo?
Here suffer those who did not sin, yet did not have the required portal of our faith. Their punishment is the denial of paradise.
Limbo might as well be Dante Alighieri's attempted retcon of Catholic beliefs to rectify the unfairness of all the people that died before Christianity came to be being sentenced to hell. But Limbo is not an established part of Catholicism. It actually came from the Divine Comedy. However, it's also the one circle of hell where Visceral broke from creating a version faithful to the poem. Since Limbo is described as being a pleasant place where the only punishment is never being able to be in the presence of God, I must have missed the part where the unbaptized infants with mantis hands appeared in the original text. Between each circle of hell, there's a platforming challenge that ends with Dante needing to cut a large chain to progress. This ends up being important later and the reason Lucifer is using Dante to free himself, but I see no reason Lucifer couldn't have gotten any of the demons to cut the chains for him. There's nothing protecting them.
Negotiate with heretics!
I can comfort you if you let my brother go.
I have a woman in Florence.
Dante, don't.
Let me comfort you.
Dante gave into the temptation of the slave girl so easily, it hardly seems like something worth making a big deal out of. He was so ready to break that vow, he would have stuck his cock in a pile of rocks if he thought there was a snake in it. And since Dante doesn't remember any of them, none of his sins have any real effect on him past sleeping with another woman. He barely spares a passing thought for the 3,000 prisoners he slaughtered for heresy. Lust, or horny gel as the always online types will know it, is where all the devs' creativity went, for obvious reasons. When developers are asked to get creative with how they implement genitals into a game, they pull out all the stops. What follows is the pinnacle of restroom wall drawings of penises turned into a level. with a veiny cock tower thrusting up from the ground, while a giant topless Cleopatra climbs on it until a cocknado stormfront descends around the entire thing. And then there's a new enemy type, a writhing woman who grows a large appendage to attack you with. Look, there isn't much in this part of the game I can show you due to YouTube, but credit where credit is due. I've never encountered anything quite like it before or since. When it comes to boss fights in Dante's Inferno, they come in two standard varieties: one-on-one fights against similarly sized enemies that require you to attack and dodge properly, and clumsy giant enemies who suffer from crippling farsightedness, since they have a hard time swatting the person running around in front of them at human-level speeds. Perhaps I've grown tired of fights where I stand on a ledge and contend with someone's hand, but I did find it a bit ironic that you begin the fight against Cleopatra by chipping her nails. That is not a good look for you, Beatrice. It's like you're wearing a sea anemone rather than some demoness's dress.
You said we would be together for all eternity.
Anthony.
So where is Mark Antony going now that he's been killed in hell? And if you can actually die in hell, how do they torture souls so effectively for eternity? Dante just drops his scythe once Cleopatra thought walks her way over to attack him, and then he gropes her before the camera makes it look like he did something else instead of stab her. And this is coming after he had a revelation that he cheated on Beatrice and felt really bad about it. After defeating some bosses, Dante gains magic spells, which seems pretty heretical to the church's teaching, but that's all aesthetics here anyway. The prisoner Dante freed in exchange for sleeping with a slave girl who claimed she was the man's sister but was actually his wife was the one who killed Dante at the start of the game. Then, having quite effectively taken revenge on the man who wronged him, he somehow learned of Dante's home address and fiancé without having questioned Dante before killing him, and then made his way through Italy during the middle of a crusade without arousing suspicion despite being Muslim, and killed Dante's father and then Beatrice even though they had nothing to do with Dante sleeping with his wife. And his wife is still alive no less. So this guy took that matter extremely personally.
Father.
You can really look at that thing and instantly recognize your father.
I recognize no one here.
You saw your own father like 3 platforming challenges ago.
You think you're a better man than your father?
I think I am too much the same man as my father.
Then turn back, coward!
Not much is made of Dante's father other than he was guilty of greed, and he and Dante didn't get along very well, and that's enough build-up for a battle to the death between them. Apparently flashback pain is felt worse in the right stomach region. I suppose this might be the devs referencing Jesus being stabbed in the stomach with a spear, but I don't see the parallel with Dante if so.
Let my power flow through your soul. Give in to our union. And together, we will regain paradise!
Was adapting the Divine Comedy in the Tale of Orpheus not enough, that you had to throw in the Tale of Demeter as well? At this point, they're almost using as much Greek myth as a God of War game. After you beat Phlegius in the standard fight its hands until the QuickTime event pops up boss battle, Dante gets to stick his scythe in its brain and ride it around to assault the city of Dis, which contains the lower hells, which the developers had greater trouble visualizing compared to the previous Deadly Sins. Each zone is less visually interesting than the previous one, with few interesting puzzles and only one real new enemy type for the rest of the game. The wisdom of St. Lucia tells me that my time here has ended, and I need to backtrack. I suppose the game testers got lost and spent a lot of time wandering around this area, and a text pop-up was their solution instead of redesigning it to be less confusing.
For it is unjust that any soul possess that of which it has robbed itself.
But you don't belong here, Mother. You died of the fever.
For someone who thought his mother died of fever, Dante had the foresight to stitch her actual suicide into the tapestry he sewed into his chest.
Francesco, my brother. You did this to me!
Francesco, Beatrice's brother, who Dante swore to protect during the Crusades, was condemned to the circle of violence after taking the fall for Dante. But unlike the other family members Dante has met down here, I can't find where he committed a deadly sin. He was shown being against killing the prisoners and admonished Dante's infidelity.
Behold the 10 circles of fraud and deceit. Those who have broken the very bond of love.
Fraud is the absolute worst part of the game, where any attempt to make it into a creative level is dropped in favor of repeated combat arenas where you had to follow a specific rule, exactly like the secret missions in Devil May Cry, which were completely optional. During one of the arenas in Fraud, Dante is tasked with defending 2 innocent living people, who I assume were pulled from Earth to be part of someone else's minigame in Hell. What a raw deal they got.
I give up on this journey. My place is here in Hell. Yours is in paradise.
I'm pretty certain that making a bet with Lucifer and using your own soul is a sin and Beatrice deserves a burn in hell.
I am truly sorry for what I have done. May you one day forgive me.
My cross.
Beatrice.
You've done well, Dante.
It's like the plot finally figured out that Beatrice being down in hell for what Dante did made absolutely no sense, so they fix it with a literal deus ex machina and it's off to heaven with her. The entire game was building to this moment, and the power of Lucifer is undone by Dante saying he's sorry.
And though you may not understand it now, you have saved much more than this innocent soul. For your role in the ongoing battle is more important than you can possibly imagine.
So all of this was divinely ordained. Now I don't even have to worry about its possible redemption. It's guaranteed.
Spur yourself onward, Dante. The final circle is near.
Dante really doesn't have any reason to journey into the lowest circle of treachery now that Beatrice resides in heaven. And heading down there requires Dante to sever the final chain binding Lucifer, freeing him. You'd think Virgil might have mentioned to Dante at some point that he shouldn't cut all those chains between the circles of hell, since they were the only thing keeping Lucifer down here.
You are the best, Dante. Many have tried, and many have failed me. Brave Ulysses, the great Alexander, Attila, Lancelot. Only you possessed a soul black enough to free me.
Hold up, I came across Attila's shade in the circle of violence where he was sent after his death. Are you saying he tried to find his way through hell like Dante did? The real Lucifer pops out of the big one. I suppose he was piloting it like a mech suit, but that begs the question of why he needed someone to cut the chains binding the big Lucifer's body, if he could have just jumped out of it anytime he wanted. Lucifer has a kind of penis you normally only see added to characters in Rule 34 art. I'm pretty sure this game counts as Rule 34 art.
Wait! There's just one last minor detail.
Are you dropping one last game trailer at the end of a PlayStation livestream event, or dragging out the plot for a twist ending?
It can't be.
You're dead, Dante.
The big twist is that Dante died at the start of the game. Yeah, I knew that already. That's why death appeared. And realizing this causes the scythe to vanish. If Lucifer had an instant win card like that, why did he bother fighting Dante at all?
I have collected many souls on this pilgrimage. Souls that I have freed from this inferno. And together, they now possess the power to free me. Father, mother, brothers, absolve me!
Just because your game has biblical origins doesn't make a deus ex machina any better. Dante wins simply because he absolved the souls of other sinners and can now tell them to absolve him, which isn't how absolving someone works. You have to ask for your sins to be forgiven in order to be saved. Dante hasn't shown regret for anything but cheating on his fiancée. Those 3,000 innocent prisoners he murdered don't seem to be weighing on him very much.
This power, Dante. We can use it together. You and I, friend. Just think what we could achieve.
Lucifer is the source of all evil as well as villain stereotypes. Clearly, they thought this needed to be a trilogy since the Divine Comedy is split into 3 acts, but when your game begins with hell, following it up with something mundane like purgatory and then actual paradise wouldn't cut it. So this game never got a sequel despite the bait.
Requiescat in pace.